But then it gets more difficult. The questions I have get more difficult. And again, if you pop up with a question, if I'm going too fast, please don't worry about writing them down, it doesn't matter. You might remember them afterwards, or if not, we can play it again at some point and have some questions. But what I find then is the questions get more tricky. Because then, and somebody asked this to you actually, it might be, I don't know who the questions came from. That doesn't matter if it's you, or it doesn't matter if it wasn't you, but I'll ask it anyway, because I get it at work. Which is, well actually, isn't it out of date? And aren't the ethics and morality it talks about just so out of date for this contemporary world? That's what I get. So I start that question by taking a step back. And I ask, and I think I'll ask you to think about this, where does our morality come from? Where do our ethics come from? Now, from where I'm sitting, no matter whether you're a Christian or whether you're not a Christian, in other words, whether you hold one of two worldviews, and there are only really two worldviews. Number one is somebody that believes there is a God who created everything, and worldview number two is somebody that doesn't believe there's a God who created everything, that believes it created itself. And we'll come on to that big question in a moment. So no matter which one of those you fit in, I believe that we are all moral beings made in the image of God. We're told that in one of the earliest books of the Bible, Genesis. It isn't necessarily the oldest, but it's certainly the earliest one in our Bible. And it talks about the fact that everybody's made in the image of God as a moral being. But where does that morality come from? Before I touch on is it out of date or not, where does it come from? Now, if you say, well, there's no God, so it can't come from God. That's it. There's no God, that's my view, so therefore it comes from, does it come from mass energy? Because if there's no God, there's nothing to start things off. There's no moral mind behind us. So let's say it comes from mass energy. Well, if it comes from mass energy, then we move into the realms of evolution. And we're told that the theory of evolution is simply the survival of the fittest. So how does surviving and winning give us morality? And another problem I have with that, if there's no God, is we know that some things are absolutely morally wrong. I'll give you an example, it'll make you cringe, but it brings the point. Torturing babies. Now there's nobody in their sane mind would say that is not morally wrong. It's an absolute moral wrong action. I've never met anybody who said to me, no. But if you've not got a starting point for your morality, everything becomes relative. There's nothing that's absolute. There can't be. Because there's no absolute beginning. So if you haven't got God, you can't have morality. But yet we all have it. And I say it's because we're made in God's image. So it's a difficult problem for somebody who doesn't believe in God to solve. Can you see what I'm saying? It's a funny one, isn't it? Because we all have that. Even somebody who doesn't believe in God has a moral instinct. It might be buried, and I'll think of some of those people who have buried it in a moment, but it's there. But where does it come from? It can't just have happened. It has to come from somewhere. So then the Bible talks about things. It talks about how we should live, for example. It talks about the fact that, let's think of the family life. So the Bible says, well, actually, the best way for us to have a successful, life-fulfilled existence is to have one man marrying one woman. What that marriage ceremony is like, we don't know, but marrying one woman, and they leave their parents and they live together. That's the Bible's way of doing things. God made us and understands how we operate, and that's how he said is the best way for us to live. Modern society, you watch all your soaps and you'll see men living with men, naturally. You'll see women living with women. You'll see, it isn't just in our soaps, it's wherever we go, isn't it? It's everywhere. And it's almost become the natural way now. It doesn't really matter. And you'll see unmarried man living with unmarried woman. You'll see married man living as much as he can with unmarried woman. You'll see married man living as much as he can with married woman. You'll see married woman living with unmarried man. And then you'll see a society that's breaking down. Now, it might seem old-fashioned that a man and a woman should leave their mothers and fathers and get married for the commitment, and it represents then one person. It represents actually God. It's another story. But it's such an important way, it's a moral way that God has set. But because we've got the ability to choose, we can choose whether we keep that or not. It's only the last 50 years or so that our society has begun to have these other ways of doing things. And it's only the last 50 years or so we've seen our society begin to break down. So I'll be interested in knowing what the argument is to say that the way the Bible has of ethics and morality, how it's still out of date. So that's how I went into that little question. So again, once you get that into your head and think about it, even for people of your age group, it's not that hard to just ask those questions. And if someone comes back with a real toughie that you think, oh my goodness, I haven't really thought of that one, be honest. Nothing worse than trying to answer a question we've got no idea what you're talking about. You lose all credibility. So just say, well, that's a good point. I don't think you floored me, but my goodness, can I think about that? And I'll come back and talk to you about it. And then just try and find out. And then you aren't just researching the Bible for academic sake and being all up here and not in here. You're trying to find out something because now you're witnessing. Now you're talking about your faith. And you hope to find an answer. And you will find an answer. So never be frightened if you get stuck halfway through. So one other little point I'll make with this morality. It's a little bit of a complex one, but I think it's worth mentioning. Here it comes. You've got to have your wits about you with this one, so get ready for it. There's a philosopher, a Scottish philosopher, who those people who are quite high up in our society, people like Dawkins, for example, Richard Dawkins, who is probably the most famous atheist, living atheist that we have. I'll mention him a bit more in a moment, but these people kind of they claim that what the philosopher, I can't remember his name now, the Scottish philosopher, Nobel Prize winner actually, said is you cannot get an ought from an is. Now that sounds weird, doesn't it? So I better explain it. And people cheat, so I'll show you how you can get an ought from an is, but it's a cheat. Here it comes. The bus is leaving at 5 o'clock, therefore you ought to leave now to catch it. Did you hear the is? The bus is leaving, there's the fact, at 5 o'clock, there's the is, therefore you ought to leave now to catch it. There's the ought of your action. But that's a cheat, because that's the ought of prudence. You ought to leave now. It's sensible to do so. But where's the morality in that? There's no moral decision. You might think, oh, well, I'll just miss the bus. I want to stay and listen to this for a while, so I won't bother leaving. That's not a moral decision, is it? There's no morality in that. And so actually what you cannot do is get any set of facts. So Dawkins would say, yes, you can, the ought is from the is, but that's wrong, it's a cheat. If you're thinking of a moral decision, you ought to do something because of a moral reason, this morality that each of us has, you cannot get to a moral decision by a set of facts, whatever those facts are. It's impossible without God. It's a complicated one, maybe for someone like this person sat over here. I want to dwell on that for a minute. But it's one of those things that you can think about and play around with in your mind. But it is impossible. And so actually it's a simple thing. But these guys that are light years ahead in their intellect than me, I'm just a bloke. You know, I've got just a couple of O-levels, a Beck National Diploma in Business Studies, and a few exams for my job. That's it. But I can't get what some of these people say. So ethics and morality, is it out of date? No, it's not. If we all follow what the Bible said, then actually the planet Earth would be a beautiful place to live. It really would. But we don't, and so sadly it's not.